Paul Cain started many meetings with the stupidest joke, but I laughed every time. He said, how many of you would rather be here than the best hospital in Kansas City? I laughed every time. 30 years. It made me laugh every time. And the proof that I'm old is that I'm now saying it. Okay. I'm going to ask the Lord, I ask you to bless this time. I ask for a spirit of inspiration that even questions, statements, comments, things I say, you'll give us just those momentary turns to the right and left that have inspiration on them and impartation. And we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen and amen. Okay, we have questions, and how do we do this? Do we have a microphone, or we do have one. Okay. Oh, man, this is the easiest meeting all day. God bless you guys. That was awesome. What's that? Ooh, yeah. Very good. Okay, comments or questions? You can make comments too. But go ahead and stand up when you do that. And I would just assume the next person be ready. So, do we only have one microphone? Okay, so okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so the Lord told me this morning to don't focus on the fast itself, but on the reason for it and perhaps the results of it. So do you feel IHOPKC is called to just pray or to get involved? I hope there's an abundance of Jewish born-again believers that result from this. Do you see IHOP involved in the discipleship of them?
Yes, but...
Right. Or just praying for a ministry that is going to disciple them?
No, we our staff here, we ask every full-time staff member to commit to 50 hours a week, a full work week. And in that 50-hour week, it includes going to church, it includes their Bible studies, their home groups, their prayer time, their training time, their team time, so it's everything. So we say half of it in the prayer room and half of it in ministry or service. So for the whole 24 years, we've always wanted them to do half of their time ministering to people, taking care of them. So that would not be a new thing. That's just standard procedure of the last 24 years, but I like the question. Hey, can we get two mics? So we got one here and one there. So we.
If we do that, you're going to have to use the one with the cord, so we can.
Okay, happy to. There you go.
Here.
Let me throw it to you.
Yep.
Just kidding. Okay.
So Kara and I were talking this morning about just the weight and the gravity we feel as moms of young kids. And I know that you did a panel discussion on this before, but we were hoping maybe you could touch on some of those points of encouragement for moms raising young kids in these days, and then especially if you have any advice for us in parenting through that.
Yeah, I'll be brief because that's a big topic. But maybe a year, maybe it's 2 years ago, I don't know, I gave a message called Why Young Moms Need Not Fear the Tribulation. Because I find that a lot of folks have presuppositions that they've not really thought through. They just assume that when the Great Tribulation comes, they're going to be in a cave starving with their kids. And I said, who said that? I don't know. Is that what's going to happen? They assume most people will die. Most people will starve. I go, where does it say that? Well, I don't know. Are we going to be starving? And so I take about 10 of those presuppositions and give Bible verses and say there will be an element of people starving, but by no means the whole earth. There will be an element of people killed, but by no means the whole earth. There will be a means by all of these things. But Jesus said, as in the days of Noah, they will be eating and drinking when he appears. So there will be people not starving to death, not living in caves. But anyway, it's that kind of unthought through presupposition that it's very natural to go to. And another thing is that their children are going to be afraid, kind of huddled in a corner. But Joel said, in that day, your sons and daughters will have dreams and visions. They'll prophesy. There'll be a spirit of revelation. There's a lot of moms, I'm picking on moms, dads, moms, grandpas, everybody, assuming, oh, my children are going to be just completely in a horrible position spiritually because of so much persecution. Because they're thinking of the future of 15-year-olds like they experienced 15 years ago when they were 15. And 15, 20 years ago, the youth groups ate pizza, played games, and had short Bible studies, and we're out of there. The future, there will be so much nobility. There will be so much revelation. There will be so much camaraderie. The Spirit of John 17 family. There will be so much. The children in that day, which is not so many days from now, will have so much interaction of nobility and courage and spiritual revelation with camaraderie. It's very opposite of the youth group 20 years ago. And so I just address a number of those things and just give 3 or 4 sentences, and a lot of moms went, oh, I just never thought about that. And there'll be, again, the courage and nobility and camaraderie because of the crisis with the spirit of revelation and the John 17 family spirit is way beyond what we're thinking right now. And so the Lord says, I got this one. Trust me, this generation will be the most mature, godly generation of believers in human history. And probably, if I'm guessing, and I don't need to guess this, they're probably 2 years old right now, are going to be born in 5 years, something like that. And so the Lord says, I've appointed them for such a time as this. And it's my plan that's going to bring them to a mature bride across the earth. I got this one. I will surprise you. So it's the most challenging generation, but it'll be the most spiritually connected to Jesus and one another empowered generation of human history. So I think we got a lot of surprises with goodness in it. There you go. And I recommend my teaching. No, I think it's on YouTube. I don't know. I didn't see it, but why young moms need not fear the Great Tribulation. Something like that's real close to the title. Something like that.
You have referenced the timing of the fast in relation to the current situation in Israel. Can you just elaborate a little bit more on current events in Israel?
Yes. First of all, I'm going to talk about the timing of the fast. And most of you know this, but I'm going to say it anyway. In 1983, May 7 to 28, 40 years ago, the Lord made it clear, May 7 to 28, 40 years ago. May 7 meant nothing to us. It was no different than June 19. It was the same thing. May 7th to May 28th, the Lord highlighted it. He knew that because he knew 40 years later, May 7 to 28 would be important. And for 40 years, I've talked about that 21 days in 1983 is the most important 3 weeks of my ministry in 50 years of preaching. Always it was May 1983. And because of that, I've told the story of those 5 or 6 supernatural things that happened in May 1983. So for 40 years, everyone around IHOP's heard the story over and over and over and over. So it was just sentimentality this year. Let's do the fast I'm not saying it was sentimentality from God's point of view, but from my point of view, when our beloved bulldog Sliker wouldn't let go of this in January, he said, we got to fast. And I said, this is on May 2023, to commemorate what we did 40 years ago type thing. And I thought, that's sentimental, but fasts are weird. I don't want to do a fast. And I pushed back, and he already ganged up on me. He had Stuart and Isaac, and about 10 of them already ready to go. So I lost that one. And because I thought it was sentimentality is what it was. That's what it was to me. And I said, okay. I hear some mumbling over there. Remember the children of Israel. They mumbled a little bit. Don't forget. Anyway. No, but to me it was sentimental, sentimental is not bad. But a 21-day fast, because we're talking about 40 years ago, like, wow. How about a party on the last day, May 28th, and let's just say, we did it 40 years ago. So anyway, the Lord picked those dates 40 years ago, and we picked them in January just because of the dates 40 years ago. We had no idea Israel was in a crisis. Didn't even cross our mind. And then what happened about 3 weeks later, because that was January, now it's February, I'm in the staff, in our leadership team, the 15 or whatever, however many's in that room on Mondays, and I call it one of my several Balaam donkey moments of my life, when I prophesied and I did not agree with what I said, but I said it. And I said, well, if we're going to do the 21-day fast in May, and it was kind of like, because I was the last guy to land it, it was like, well, if we got to do it. It was a little bit like that. I tried not to have that attitude, but down inside it's where it was. And so I said, let's just do Israel 24 hours a day for 21 days. And a couple of them said, that's God. And I went, wait a second. Where did that come from? No. And I thought, this would be so boring to do that. I mean, to pray for Israel 24 hours a day for 21 days. Like, ugh. And I wanted to grab that and pull it back. And I don't know who a couple thought, that's God. I'm going, I mean, really, I was not excited. But it came out of my mouth. And I couldn't take it. I tried to take it back. No, I'm not sure. I don't know if that will work. You know, I start thinking through, nah, they're not going to like that. It's going to be a real hard sell. And then it was another couple weeks later in one of our meetings where we had some international leaders visiting, and they said, hey, invite all your friends to it around the world. And I said, our friends around the world don't want to go on a 21-day fast to commemorate our 40-year-ago fast. I go, that doesn't make any sense to me. And if they called one from 40 years ago, I would not join them, so why should they join us? I said, I wouldn't do that to them. How presumptuous is that? I'm not really answering your question, but I'm going to. And I'm just telling you how this thing happened in the most non-amazing way, meaning it was not great leadership planning. I'm on a Zoom call. I've been maybe 50 of them. That's not an actual number, but it's getting close. With just leaders all around, and I get asked, this is amazing. I was with Eric Metaxas on his call, and he goes, amazing. Mike Bickle saw what was happening in May and called a fast. I go, well, not really, Eric. He goes, well, what do you mean? I go, no, it's not how it happened. He goes, well, how did God supernaturally show you? I go, that's not really how it happened either. He goes, I don't get why you're doing this. I go, I'm starting to figure it out myself, just so you know. And I said, the guy said, 21, let's fast 21 days in January. And I said, no. And then a guy, me, said, let's do Israel 20. And then I said no after that. I didn't want to do that. I didn't think that would be an easy ownership of our team. And then another guy said, tell the nations. They said they don't want to do it. And so I asked the Lord for a couple of confirmations quietly. I didn't tell anybody. And those confirmations happened, within 24 hours. And here's how it is with a fleece. Gideon had a fleece. And if you have a fleece, you say, God, if it's you, do this. I wouldn't do that more than 2 or 3 times in 50 years. That's not something you do to buy a car. That is a huge thing, because if God answers that fleece, you are bound for the rest of your days to what that was. A lot of people throw out fleeces just kind of casually because they don't know it's really a high-level thing to do if God answers it. And so I understand that. So I said, Lord, if da-da-da-da, and I'm not going to tell nobody, and then I'll do it. I don't want to tell my friends to do this or ask them. I mean, again, I wouldn't do it if they did it. They asked me. And the next day it happened. So then we came into our seminar room, the 100 leaders, and I said, hey, if we're really going to do this, if we're going to call people to the nations, I got to know that you're all in. And I said, so we got maybe 50 departments, some number like that, I don't know. And I said, I'm talking about shutting down almost everything. And keep the business office going. We do need our checks, and keep the pipes running. Maintenance team, please don't back down. And anyway, but let's shut down everything. And I'm calling, there's 100 leaders of our 600 staff were in the room. I go, I'm calling like the majority of you to do this. Release all your responsibilities 12 hours a day for 21 days. The room kind of got silent. Whoa. And in the next days, 300 of our 600 staff committed to that. We'll do it 6 to 12 hours. We'll aim for 12. And we'll do at least 6, but we're going to aim for 12 hours for 21 days. And I went, okay, if it's that level of commitment, I have courage to call others. And so some guy was Tom at? Some guy. Were you the one filming it? Because I was kind of unsettled. You get your staff, you're going to ask them to be in a prayer room 12 hours a day for 21 days and fast, and they're going to do it for Israel. Like, really? I was like a little unsettled. Like, we've never done anything that intense. And we love praying for Israel. You know, we have 9 prayer meetings a week, but every prayer meeting, 84 2-hour prayer meetings a week for 3 weeks, 252 straight prayer meetings. And they're going to be in the room 12 hours a day. And fasting, various levels of fasting. We're not defining that. Some will fast real intense, a little bit intense, not so intense, not at all. And that's up to whoever. And I said, you know, we've never sat in a room 12 hours a day. So this is a cool announcement, but this is going to be challenging in the flesh in a way that we're not really imagining. It's not going to be easy, and it's not always going to be dynamic. I know there'll be great music up on the stage. It'll be tremendous things coming. But in your flesh, I mean, about day 12, we go, why did I do this? Only 10 more days. Okay. And so, because I've done a handful of those over the years, and they're great announcements. I mean, people are so excited. About day 3, the narrative starts shifting. About day 12, it's surprising how people feel released by the Spirit. And I don't even mind that. I get that. Again, I've done a handful of these, and that's why I was pushing back. I go, this isn't fun or funny. This is intense. 12 hours a day. Okay, and so they filmed it, and someone put it on the YouTube that night. I didn't even know they did, and I don't care they did, and I don't even want to know who did. Someone goes, who did? I go, I don't know. But 10 days later, it had 50,000 views of that 40-minute talking head in a room, just talking for 40 minutes to a staff. We don't ever tape staff meetings, you know. When we're talking openly. And when we got to the 50,000 in 10 days, and about 300,000 people under these people saying yes, I said, now it's March 7th we started, now it's March 17th. I said, this is no longer an IHOP thing. This is not about IHOP. Now we are one of the units. This is a God thing. I realize I've not even got close to answering your question, but I'm getting there. And but I'm just telling you the story anyway, just because the context, I think if you're strange enough, and I say that in a godly way, to get on an airplane or drive 8 hours to come here and stay in hotel rooms, then you're strange enough to care about the story. So I'm considering who I'm talking to. You're the type of people that like this kind of thing. No, you could tell people like you guys got a certain look in your eye. You know, yep, they'll do it. I know they'll do it. And so at the 10-day mark, which was March 17th, the 10-day mark, the 300,000, that's when we said we're going to make the Isaiah 62 website, because this is no longer an IHOP thing anymore. The Isaiah 62 website is basically a directory where ministries can put their information if they're committed to pray 1 hour a day for 21 days with at least 2 to 3 people. If they do that, then the Isaiah 62 website is a directory so people can find each other in their region. So that, because we don't want people connected to IHOP. That's not the goal. I mean, we don't care if they do, but that's not the goal. The goal is for a global conversation to explode that involves 5 or 10 million people in May. And a year from now, 40 or 50 million will be in the conversation, because those 5 or 10 million, they all have 2 or 3 friends. And they will talk about this. There's nothing in history that's ever happened like this for Israel, ever, not even close. And, you know, I've asked a bunch of my Jewish leaders and prayer, house of prayer historians of the prayer movement. There's a few of them around. I said, anything like this? And they said, no, not on record. Nobody knows. And so I've asked a few, has there ever been 10,000 Gentiles that prayed for Israel for 10 straight days? Not that we ever heard of. And so we're talking, I mean, it's probably going to be somewhere 5 to 10 million involved at some level. Not all of them doing an hour a day, but a little bit, a lot. But I believe about 5 million will do it 1 hour a day, and probably another 5 million will do it once or twice a week, checking it out. They're not really committed to it. But my point is not that. Those 5 or 10 million will tell their friends. And 3 or 4 friends later, a year later, there'll be 40 to 50 million people in the conversation of the biblical narrative of Israel. That is going to change human history, completely change human history. Because throughout, since Augustine, 350 AD, the church has backed away from Israel and said the church is Israel. So for 2,000 years. Yeah, that's right. 2,000, is that right? I don't know, 2023, it's not 20. I mixed it up. Bunch of years, 17 years, yeah. Never was good at geography, so I mix up those numbers all the time. So 1,700 years, thank you. And so it never happened, ever. So this is going, the curiosity of this is going to cause a lot of people to say, what? Where's this in the Bible? I mean, what? And so a year from this May, I expect 30 to 50 million Christians having conversations about Israel that they've never had before this time. This is incredible eschatological moment. It's an Esther moment in salvation history. It really is. An Esther moment, Esther 4, where Mordecai says, go before the king for the sake of the deliverance of Israel. If you don't do it, somebody else will. But you were born for such a time as this. And that's such a time as this verse. We use it all the time about many cool things, but it was about a crisis in Israel. And she would risk her life because it's worth it. It's such a time as this that God put you in your position. And I'm thinking 1,700 years later, or 2,000 years since the cross, for such a time as this, a year from today, 30, 40, 50 million Gentiles talking about Israel. Are you kidding me? So this May is so, the prayer itself is dynamically important. But I believe equally important is the conversation the next 12 months. And then the next 10 years. I mean, the idea of replacement theology, that Goliath, that, I mean, a lot of good guys teach it, and they love Jesus, and they love the Bible as much as I do and you do. But it's a real big, significant, serious error. And it's a bit of Goliath breathing at the church all of these years like a dragon. No, that Goliath is coming down in this next 12 months. And historically, it won't. Replacement theology and silence in the church is a thing of the past, starting in this May. Give it a whole year. Call it a year season. It is gone. Now, there'll be a few guys that will be talking about it, and you really want a few. Because if you get 10 people really, smart, I mean, super big Greek, Hebrew, a book, 300 pages on why Israel's not the church, why it is the church, we need 10 of them. I mean, persuasive, with millions following them. Because if they weigh in heavy, the numbers in the conversation will grow another 50 million. So we want some opposition. We don't have to want it, it's coming. But that opposition will only double and triple the numbers of people in the conversation. So I'm looking at this, but I want to just declare Goliath of replacement theology is, in this May, is a catalytic moment. And soon after, a year or two, I don't care about the timing, saying it exactly right, that Goliath is going to be gone in terms of the predominant narrative. It'll still be people saying it. But right now, man, I got to get to that question. I really am going to get to that question. But right now, I want to explain replacement theology. You know what it is. That the church replaced Israel in the promises. But the odd thing is, the people who teach it, the church replaces Israel in the promises, but not in the troubles. I mean, it's really a one-sided replacement. I go, hey, you better hope we did not replace Israel. Have you read the script? And they go for the promises, but not the trouble and the discipline that wakes them up, that Dave Slager hit like bold as a lion. That's why I said this bold-hearted guy. That was pretty good last night. That was really good stuff. And so why is replacement theology so big? I'm making up this number. I don't have any facts. There's 500 or 1,000, I don't really know the number, seminary professors with PhDs who are Greek and Hebrew scholars who teach in seminaries. They teach this, replacement theology. Hundreds of thousands of pastors, male and female, have come out of their teachings over the last 40 years. These hundreds of thousands of pastors, they can't prove replacement theology because you can't prove it. There's about 3 verses you got to work with, but you got to dismiss about 100 verses. And that's why it takes a 200 to 300 page book to prove it. It's too hard to prove. So all these seminary graduates, they got their degree, their master's degree. They know for a fact it's true, but they can't prove it at all. It's like, it's so complicated. And besides that, my people don't really care. So it's kind of a seminary professor thing. But hundreds of thousands of pastors come through them. Here's what's left of them in 40 years. I'm just making up 40 years too. They're intimidated. So they don't promote replacement theology because they only got about 3 verses to work with, and they don't know how to answer the other 100 verses. They just go, they don't say anything. So the silence in their intimidation. So a family's in their church 20 years has never heard about Israel one time. So the replacement theology, my church didn't do Israel, is really because of silence, not because of conviction that the church really replaced Israel. Nobody could prove it, but those guys with 200 and 300 page books that nobody could really get through anyway, that's intimidated hundreds of thousands of pastors into silence. Those pastors can't prove it. And there are people who don't even care. If they started doing it, they'd fall asleep and they'd quit coming to meetings. Because it's really hard to do. So in IHOP, our 24-year anniversary is coming up next month, and I'm guessing nearly 25,000 people have been a part of IHOP in a full-time way. A number of them 3 and 6 months, a number of them 3 to 5 years, a number of them 10 years, whatever. Let's just make up the number. It was 20,000 some years ago. I don't really care about that number. That's not my point. My point is this. Out of those near 25,000 people, 90% of them over 25 years, the 24 years of IHOP, they come here. I can say it, they'll think I'm prophesying. I go, let me guess. Your church didn't do Israel. How did you know? 90% of near 25,000 people, that's what they say. That's the most repeated statement of bewilderment when someone comes. My church didn't do Israel. But here's the good news. In 1 hour of information, you share about 20 verses. There's hundreds of verses, but you share 20. They go, jokingly, when did they put those verses in the Bible? I've never heard those verses. It's really easy to make the case. And so these hundreds of thousands of pastors, they don't even think about those verses, but they're people silenced. But my point is, when these 30, 40, 50 million people 1 and 2 years from now are in the conversation, it only takes an hour to shift their mindset. It's not hard at all. And God's about to bring a death blow to the Goliath of replacement theology. And it's on our watch that it's happening. It's amazing. And it's for our children and grandchildren. Because God's blessing on the city of Jerusalem is deeply related to the Great Commission being fulfilled and the fullness of the Gentiles. It all goes together. There will be so many teachings on that. So, Bickle, answer the question. What's the crisis in Israel? I thought you would never ask. Here it is. I'm just having fun. Is that I'll give you 3 crises. There's about 5 or 10, depends on who you're talking to. I only heard about this maybe 6 weeks ago. After the fast, after we decided to invite people, so after March 17th, so about 6 weeks ago. I'm talking to one of the main leaders in Jerusalem who loves Jesus. He's committed to Israel. He's on a Zoom call. We got a bunch of folks, and he said, this is like the middle of March. He goes, well, there's probably going to be a civil war in April or May. And I said, I don't understand. He goes, well, a civil war. I go, you figuratively? They go, oh, no, a actual civil war. And he's really smart and informed, and I'm new to that. I never thought such a thought. I went, surely that's not true. He goes, he didn't exactly say this, but surely you're not paying attention to what's happening in the news. He didn't say that. He's too nice. He goes, go check it out. And I asked a couple of other guys from Jerusalem in the area, and they said, absolutely. Probably it will happen. I couldn't even get my brain around this. A real civil war. And it's called the judicial reform is the essence. That's the term in all on the news. And I went, so I thought, if this is true, I go on the internet, saw about 20 YouTube clips of about 5 minutes. And because I've seen 20 5-minute clips, I am seriously an authority on the subject now. I'm your guy if you want insight. I've seen 20 5-minute clips. I'm a YouTube. No. All I know enough to say is this, that people, real secular atheists, spiritual, whether they're rabbis or messianic believers, far right extreme politically, far left liberal politically, all 4 positions many of their spokespersons are saying it will probably happen. I go, are you kidding? And I've heard different reasons why, and it's just go to YouTube. You can really kind of find out. It's not complicated to find out. And I just couldn't believe it. They're all saying, not that it will happen, it will probably happen. And now Netanyahu, I've seen a few YouTube things of him recently, and he's using the term civil war. He goes, this is not a quote, but we don't need for this to end up in a civil war. But the word civil war is now in the lips of the most prominent leaders. I'm going, my goodness, what on earth? And most of the Western media is not picking up on that. I mean, 700 Club, Gordon Robertson and Chris Mitchell, those kind of guys are picking up on it. But the Western media is not. They're way left and and the argument, judicial reform, I'll give it to you just the simplest, so don't take my word for it. I'm a zero authority on this, that's pretty obvious. But the Israel Supreme Court has 15 members in it. Okay, the guys are explaining this to me. I didn't fact check this, but I heard it a couple times. I assume it's right. But go fact check it if you really want to say it adamantly. I go, there's like 15, I think exactly 15, I don't know. But the Supreme Court in Israel is different than America because the Supreme Court in Israel picks the Supreme Court. They're not picked by a democratic process like we have a president and a House of Representatives, a Congress, those things. All of those things come together, and then the president picks one. In the outflow of his political clout or whatever. In Israel, the 15 pick the next one. And so they're far leftists, and they only pick far leftists. And so that's situation number one, and that's been going on for years. Now over situation number two, and again, I'm not an expert on the political nuances of Israel at all. I've just heard this 5 or 6 times. This is probably close to true. Is that Israel's government, very similar to England, is a prime minister has to form a coalition government, and they have to have 51% of the Knesset. The Knesset's 120 people, probably related. 120 shows up in the Old Testament. I guess that's where they got it. I don't know. But they need 51%, so they need, out of 120, 61 people. And whenever the prime minister, England or Israel, something like this, when they lose the 51%, then they lose their government. Then they have another election. That's why they've had about 5 elections in England and in Israel in the last 3, 4, 5 years. I mean, they don't wait every 4 years. When the guy loses 51%, they have another thing. He's lost his government. That's something close to that. So Netanyahu, I think this is his 3rd time. And so the way that, now these are some Christian leaders telling me this, but they each said it, several of them have said it, so I think it's possibly true. But again, I'm not an expert, and so I just always want to say that. And so there's a number of conservative, Orthodox, rabbi-type guys. I don't know if they're rabbis, but Orthodox that are in the Knesset. I don't know the number. I've been saying this for like 4 weeks. I ought to just go check out the number. Let's say there's about 10 of them. I don't know if there's 10. They went to Netanyahu and said, if you will change the Supreme Court, break up their stronghold over our nation, because they're pushing the gay agenda, they're pushing abortion, they're pushing all these things. And these kind of conservative Orthodox guys, they're wrecking our nation with American values. If you take them on, we will stand with you. My guess, just a guess, they probably don't really like him. And my guess is he might not be best friends with them. That's just a guess. That's a guess. But they said, and the minute you don't stand, I don't know about the minute, but we're pulling out and you're losing your coalition government. And so, okay. So Netanyahu, and there's about 5 other forces, but that's a big one, but there's 2 or 3 more like that. Because he got 64 votes. He only needs 61 out of 120. He's got 3 to spare. He's got a couple other elements like that were not naturally for him, but gave him ultimatums. And so he stands up and he says, we're going to reform the Supreme Court. Supreme Court has all the liberal media, which everyone, and they go, you want to bet? Watch. And he has two reforms. He wants the Knesset to have a vote in who the future ones are, like America. And they want the Knesset that if the Supreme Court makes a law, the Knesset, if they have 51%, they could stop that law. Because these laws are super liberal. And they're, all through their school system, just the gay agenda, the trans agenda, all these things that the left is calling, like in America, equality, diversity, and freedom. But the guys on the right, these Orthodox guys, are going, we're calling it corruption and destruction to our nation. And so they're telling Netanyahu, according to the guys telling me, Netanyahu, I haven't returned any of his calls, just so you know. So I don't know. I could be a little off on this, but there's a lot of folks, I've told the story several times, they go, that's pretty much, you're on the right, and the right, there's all kinds of nuances, more intense than what I'm saying that I don't get. So the left is going, you're not taking our power. So they got the media, and they got some real big money guys, billions of dollars, funding key voices in the left. And so the left is telling the community, Netanyahu's destroying democracy, meaning he's not going to let the gay agenda get in schools, and he's going to try to stop abortion. Those kind of things. And I don't know if those are the exact things, but so the media's, Netanyahu's going to destroy democracy. Stop him. It's anarchy. It's tyranny. He's destroying us. But so there's 500,000 in the streets protesting. Now for 12 weeks, tens of thousands, but the last week, like 500,000. Because the population, the general population, many of the millions are believing the narrative, Netanyahu's destroying democracy. And he is a tyrant. Netanyahu's side, which has got many different factions that don't all agree, they're saying those guys are destroying democracy. And it's anarchy. They want to control our schools. They want to control our tax money. They are destroying us. So both groups are doubled down. And if Netanyahu backs down, he loses the government. If they don't, it's a real intense thing. So a couple of other things happened that intensified it. When he fired his Secretary of Defense. And that's a pretty dramatic story of what happened. But he did that in context of his council. They were, together. Again, I don't know. Like I said, I haven't answered his phone calls. But I don't know the real dynamics. But so they have 500,000 night after night in the street on the left. But there's that many on the right, actually. There's as many on the right who think that's a false narrative. Very similar to America, except for America, we get to, through Democratic elected officials, pick the Supreme Court. They don't. And the Supreme Court doesn't get to make all the laws at will. And our Supreme Court makes some, but they can't do it. So it's way more intense than America, in the way I've understood it. So then what happens is Netanyahu got up and they said, he says, I'll put a pause on the judicial reform. This is at Passover. I'll put a pause. He didn't say I'm changing my mind, and his government over here says, you better not change your mind. We're out if you don't stand. I'm thinking private. I didn't say I was out. I just said I'm pausing it. I can imagine their 12-hour conversations every day. It's pretty intense. The people on the left are going, well, he put a pause on, so yeah, but he's a liar. Let's not back down. Well, it took some of the fuel out of the movement of 500,000 a night, so it's died down. Because the Knesset, he put a pause on it, the Knesset, because of Passover, went on a 30-day recess. And so the conversations dialed down. The recess is over May 1st. The conflict is full steam May 1st. And so 40 years ago, that's why I told the long story about 40 years ago, the Lord picked May 7 to 28. We didn't care about those dates. He did. He picked May 7 to 28. And 40 years later, I'm going, I didn't know about that crisis in January and February and March when we started talking about this. It was after we said it I went, are you kidding? I look up and say, Lord, he goes, yeah, I've been planning this for 40 years, well, much longer than that, but that's good enough for you for now, for 40 years. I've been planning this. And yeah, I picked those dates 40 years ago because he did real clearly. And May 7th meant nothing to us. Because I've told the story for 40 years, May 7th is real special to the IHOP community. But before that, it was the same as June 18th. We didn't know anything. But now I go, Lord, my goodness. And, 5 or 10 million involved, some degree. Many of them an hour a day, many of them an hour a week. I don't know. And a year from today, 40, 50 million in the conversation. And another thing happens. I said there's 3 things. There's really 5 or 10. For the first time in history, Iran has a nuclear weapon ready in May. Now, I've watched again 5 or 10 YouTubes, so I'm an authority on this one too. And some of these smart guys go, this is in March. They said, they'll have it by the end of April. Another guy goes, oh, that's ridiculous. They won't have it till May. Another guy goes, no, they won't get it till June. April, May, June, okay. They get it. I don't know which is real, but it's what? And they describe why they will have it then. And now that's what really ramped up in the news in the last 3-4 days. Because Iran did not threaten to destroy Israel with a bomb. They promised to destroy Israel when they get the bomb. And they will have that nuclear weapon. They either have it or they will very soon. Whether it's a week or a month, I don't know. But May is dead center again. Oh my goodness. This is so intense. I'll tell you one more, and I'm more even hesitant to act like I know what I'm talking about on this third one. I don't know that much about the first 2. I just want to keep saying it because there's really smart people whose lives are on the line by the right story. And I don't want to be playing around with something that serious. But I've heard this over and over, so I know it's in the right direction of what the true narrative is. But Israel, the West Bank. Now, we all hear the West Bank, but not everybody in America knows where it's at. The West Bank is, that, I'm making up that 10 or 15 miles, by about 5 miles. I just made that up. I just do it on the map. It's about that big on the map. And Jerusalem is right near the middle of it. That's called the West Bank, Judea and Samaria. That's what it was called in the Bible. Well, the Palestinians have their homes there. And in the 6-day war, the Israel gained the West Bank and got control of it, but gave it back to them. And so people in Israel say it's still really Israel's and Abraham and David in the Bible. And the Palestinians go, well, we've been here for 1,000 years. It's ours. So that big debate, I'm not going into that debate. That's not what I'm doing. Is that Israel, after 1967, and they officially gave the territory back, the United Nations made a law, real strong. You can't put any settlements in the West Bank. You can't put any. Well, Israel put one, put another one, put another one, put another one, put another one. And the United Nations going, we're warning you, put another one, put another one, put another one. And now I forgot the number. If anybody knows the actual number, plus or minus 10, it's like 230 of them. Does anybody know that number? Because that was a month ago, and I've been doing these Zoom calls all day, so I'm a little loose in the brain here. Some number like that. I mean, it's exploded. And these settlements is what Israel calls them. And Palestinians call it, you're occupying and you're oppressing us. Because Israel comes in with their state-of-the-art technology, and they have like really nice, really good-looking, like subdivisions, a mile or 2 long. And maybe they're not all that big, but think of a mile or 2. But right next to it is a poor, like inner-city poor village. And Israel's got big fences around all of them, and really nice and technology, beautiful manicured lawns and landscape. And the Palestinians look over the fence and go, my goodness. And Israel did 10, 20, 30. Now I think it's like 200. I think it's 230. I don't know. Go check that number. But part of the government of Netanyahu, one of the other wings, who maybe did not stand for him, but now will, said, you give us a free hand to double the amount of settlements, because you may not be in power long. And if the left is in power, they will stop us. And we're only with you if you look the other way and let us double down. Now, that's what I've heard. I could be wrong on this. But the number of settlements is increasing, unusually rapid, because they think they got a very short amount of time until Netanyahu's out. Again, I could be off on a bit of this, but they're increasing. Well, the Palestinian youth are going, this is ridiculous. This is because they're nice. And the villages, many of them are poor. Not all of them, but many of them, it's just rough. And they're looking over at the Israel prosperity. And so this is my read, okay? This is purely my read on it. These Palestinian youth, let's say these 20-year-olds, these guys, I'm psychologically thinking I'm understanding a teeny bit of their mindset. They're going, Israel is taking property and pushing my mom off of her territory. My mom's in her 60s. I'm not going to let this happen. Not on my watch. So they're taking these Molotov cocktails and things, and they're bombing. They're creating havoc. To them, it's about the Palestine to them, but I think it's about their moms. I think they're saying, we'll be fine one day, but my mom has worked her whole life, and they're taking her land block by block. Not going to happen. So they're doubling down because the amount of settlements is speeding up. Because some people in the government, because the United Nations won't touch it, and they know it, this part of Netanyahu's government. And I've been told some of them are saying, Netanyahu, we only got a minute. We are putting more and more in because it's really hard to undo them once you put them in. And so these kids, I get it. I get it. They're thinking of their moms. Now, again, I could talk to some 25-year-old. He goes, that's not it at all. I think it probably is to few of them. So, what's the water? That was great, that water. That carpet needed watering. Something grows there. I did it. So what happens? They're throwing these Molotov cocktails. The anger is intensified. I get it. But the military, the Israel military, because they got the right, real strong right government is going, we're going to tell you for sure, you will pay if you touch us. So the military's doubling down. So those young 20, 30-year-olds are doubling down. So the military's doubling down, and that thing is ratcheting up right now in May. Well, it's right now, but it's unique ratchet up over the last number of years. And there's about 4 or 5 other areas, but May is the greatest crisis. I think it's possible with all these. Many say it will be the greatest crisis in their 75 years as a nation. Because they became a nation, their 75-year anniversary is May 14. That's their 75th year. And they've never had a crisis of a civil war, a nuclear weapon, and the social unrest of these young guys who are thinking, we can't be silent. Kill me if you want to. But the Israeli government say, we can't let you have the message that you're getting away with this. It's stuck. It is stuck like it's never been stuck in modern history. So, that was a very short answer to a very short question.
So we have an online question from Grace. She wants to know, based on Dave's message on Friday, why would the Lord use such a severe way, i.e. the rage of Satan, to discipline Israel, then ask us to intercede to mitigate the damage on Israel? Why would he not just use a gentler process in the first place?
Well, having very little insight into the full counsels of God, I'll start with that. No, the Lord looks at me and goes, hey, little guy, I love you, but there's so much you don't know. But I love you. And so I feel good that I'm loved, but the more I know, the more I'm very aware of how much more I don't know. The deeper I get an understanding of all these 150 chapters and the rest, I go, there's so much more I don't know that I did not know I did not know. And so I know this thing. When trouble increases, humans change their conversation. I do know that. When trouble increases, believers and unbelievers, they talk to God different, even unbelievers. When trouble increases, they talk to one another different. They pray different. They give different sermons. They have different family meetings. Many things talk when trouble increases, and the Lord knows that. Because the Lord is not, I like what Dave said last night, the Lord's not going to violate the free will. He doesn't want robots who are automated to, I obey you, I love you. He goes, no, I'm going to create a circumstance with the right combination of blessing and trouble in the right season to where you change your conversation and you lose a bunch of options. Because if you lose those options, your conversation changes. And so the Lord has the right amount of blessing and pressure in every season in every nation for 2,000 years. I mean, the whole 6,000 years since, the beginning, whatever. And so that's kind of the big picture. And so the Lord is allowing the trouble, the adversary, he's giving him more room to move. I mean, one of the most troubling things in the biblical narrative is God raises up the Antichrist. It's like, what? And God allows the harlot Babylon to exist. When I started really studying this a lot more thoroughly, I thought there's about 10 things in the divine narrative of the plan. I go, Lord, don't be offended, but if I was you, I wouldn't put that in the plan. That's bad. Why would you let the Antichrist prosper? And why would you create an economic system, with AI and digital stuff, because no one knew about that 50 years ago. Why would you create an economic system where the most evil man in history could control economics? Why would you do that? Why would you do that? Because it's the Lamb who opens the first seal. And there's a number of other verses. The Lord does it. It goes, the adversary. The Lord let Satan in the garden. And at the end of the millennium, the Lord lets the snake back in the garden again. And so because the Lord wants choices, because he's a God of relationship. He's a God who loves intimate encounter. We are the children before the Father, and we're the corporate bride before the Son. And he wants genuine love. That's what it's all about. And when we have all the options, human history is documented, we choose profoundly make wrong choices. When he removes the options, our conversation changes. And in the conversation, we find each other. We start expecting new things. We start praying for new things. And so it's not just Israel wakes up in the pressure. So does the whole Laodicean billion-member church. And so does the billion-soul harvest of Gentiles that aren't saved yet. I mean, the church wakes up. The unbelievers in the nations, the billion-soul harvest, it's probably a couple billion, but let's just say a billion, and Israel. So you think all three arenas. Because some folks focus on Israel mostly because there's way more in the Bible about Israel. But Israel's a picture. It's going to happen to the unbelieving Gentiles in the earth, and it's going to happen to the Laodicean majority of the body, the billion souls in the church right now. So I think there's a billion souls now. That's what guys say. I don't know the number. Don't overly care if I know the number. And a billion coming. But the billion now are the vast majority, meaning 80-90%, are really suffering with spiritual dullness and a Laodicean spirit of dullness and spiritual boredom and compromise. So I'm thinking about Israel. I'm thinking about a billion unbelieving Gentiles, and I'm thinking about a billion born-again believers. And the Lord says, I know what I'm doing. And I'm going to let the adversary have more room because I want the conversation to change radically, but I'm going to release power to meet them too. And so that's kind of put the whole thing together.
Okay, we got another online question real quick, and then we'll go back to the room. Can you compare and contrast the role of the resurrected saints in the millennium versus the role of the non-resurrected believing Israel in the millennium?
Yes. I mean, ever so little I can, yes. There's a number of verses on that in the Bible. Not thousands, but we will have resurrected bodies in the New Jerusalem, and the New Jerusalem's coming down to the earth. It says it 3 times in the book of Revelation. I believe it comes down to the earth at the second coming. I don't believe the New Jerusalem sits on the earth because the millennial Jerusalem, the 10-mile square millennial Jerusalem in Ezekiel 40 to 48, about 10 miles square, it's not is the New Jerusalem's up 1,500 miles or 1,380, whichever translation you're using. So 10 miles, but it's in proximity, and I believe they're dynamically connected. So we live in the New Jerusalem in sight right there of the earthly Jerusalem. And we got resurrected bodies, and at the speed of thought or thereabouts, we can be anywhere in the earth. Like an angel can get to Chicago and back really fast. And so we'll get from our home in the New Jerusalem to our assignment on the earth way quicker than you got from your hotel room to this room. And so you'll get there really fast. And so we live there. We have resurrected bodies, but we're ruling on the earth with not just the unsaved survivors of Israel, but the unsaved survivors of the Gentiles. And I'm making up the number. Nobody knows the number, but I think there's several 100 million unsaved survivors, which is an incredibly small number compared to 8 billion. And maybe it's 5 or 10, maybe 7 or 800 million. I don't know. Isaiah 24 said it's very few. But 400 or 500 million compared to 8 billion, that's really few. And I forget those numbers. I'm just giving you a sense. There's not only like 10, and there's not, billions. It's some number. It's unsaved survivors of the tribulation, Jew and Gentile. So it's both. And so when Jesus comes, he raptures us. We get changed instantly. So there's the second group, those who took the mark of the beast. They don't vanish. They get captured and executed. I mean, when some people think when Jesus comes, like the unbelievers the mark of the beast people all disappear. No. There's tribunals, really fast ones, like the Nuremberg courts after Nazi Germany. It took a year. This will probably take 5 minutes. They will be tried and executed. They will be killed. And it'll take a little bit of time. A whole bunch of them die when Jesus comes around Jerusalem, but there's still millions and millions of mark of the beast people still in the earth. And so that's a process, but I don't want to get into that. But then there's the 2, 3, 4, 500 million who said no to the Antichrist, and they said no to Jesus. And they're the unsaved survivors, Gentiles. And they have natural bodies. And again, I've asked the people, go, where's that in the Bible? I go, where's it in the Bible? They all vanish. They go, I don't know. There's about 10 or 12 verses. It's called Those That Are Left. And I have those verses on a number of handouts, and a bunch of you and us and them have that. They're not hard to find. It's called Those That Are Left. And so, and then all the kings of the earth, the 200 nations, we don't know that it will be 200 nations. It may be way more, way less. We don't have to know. They're Gentile kings. And they're not kings that are now. The kings now, I mean, some of them are born getting on fire, but the kings at the very end, they get executed by Jesus. And so there's a whole new set of Gentile kings. And these Gentile kings are all brand new believers. Because if they were believers, they would have been raptured. And they're going, but they're going, my goodness. It will be the most traumatic, those final 30 days, just beyond anything we could imagine. And so we will, like angels, like there's angels in this room right now. If the veil lifted, we go, oh, wow, more than we thought. And boy, there's a whole bunch over at that table. No, I'm just saying. This is a joke. It probably is. But my point is, angels appear occasionally. They're over cities and regions. They appear occasionally and with dynamic results. Well, in the age to come, the veil's lifted. So instead of angels being over cities, resurrected saints with resurrected bodies will be the government over those cities. And the non-resurrected kings and governors and mayors, they together will be talking. Just like we get a prophetic dream and we hear a voice, that's an angel helping us in our government. Meaning in our little ministry, our family, our business, our home group. We hear something in a dream. It's an angel. It's the Lord speaking to us or the Holy Spirit. This time the veil's lifted, so they're sitting around tables. And the snapshot of that is the 40 days in Acts chapter 1 where Jesus with a resurrected body sat and taught men with natural bodies. He ate with them, taught them, moved in and out of the room. Could be any, it's super easy. But they couldn't. They had natural bodies. So that 40-day window is a snapshot of what that 1,000 years would be like. Something like that. I'm sure there's a lot more details. Yes. Or whoever the microphone. Oh, here.
Yes, I have a question about Ezekiel 38 and 39, the war. Is that part of the war of Armageddon and that coalition that forms in Ezekiel 38? Do you see that coalition forming presently?
Good question. The big conversation on Christian TV and stuff is that this is the Ezekiel 38 war, and I'm convinced it is not. That the Ezekiel 38 war, I believe there's things are stirring, and there probably will be a relationship to things stirring now to that group. I have no doubt that in principle there's a number of players coming into line. But the Ezekiel 38 war, and it's basically, if you have a pre-tribulation rapture theology, then this is the Ezekiel 38 war. And because I don't think that's the biblical narrative, that war is when Israel is at peace and all of her walls are down. So it's unwalled. Right now, there's, again, I'll fact check something, because this is like a year ago, I worked on this. There's like 800 miles of walls around settlements. I don't know if that's the right number, because, I mean, it's been a long couple days, weeks or whatever. But something like that. There's like 800 miles of walls, mostly around settlements. Something is going to happen which is, I believe, an agreement with the Antichrist, who's posturing himself as a man of peace. They're going to make an agreement with him, but other nations will too. And those walls will come down. And the Palestinians go, okay. And the trade-off for them is they got to let Israel have their temple with sacrifices. So the Ezekiel 38 narrative I hear on Christian TV is the war is now. I go, yeah, but the walls are all there. They're all there. And after the war, all of Israel knows the Lord. But their idea is after the war, the rapture comes and then Israel goes through the tribulation. But all Israel gets saved at the end of that war. And all these kings are executed. And I'm convinced it is I'm going to say it slightly different. It's okay because the popular term is the Battle of Armageddon. And millions say it, that's okay to say it. But actually, it's the Armageddon campaign. It's Armageddon in the north is the military staging area. That's where the nations bring their armies. The battle is for Jerusalem. In Ezekiel, Zechariah 12 and 14, and Zephaniah 3, a bunch of places, Joel 3, the battle's Jerusalem. So it's really, when we say the Battle of Armageddon, what we really mean is the Battle of Jerusalem and the Armageddon staging area. And so, but it's okay to say Battle of Armageddon because 99%, that's how we say it. But just so you know, and there's a number of battles in the Armageddon campaign, but the final one is when the Antichrist, Gog, pulls his mask off and he says, I'm not for you. I'm going to kill you and plunder you. And then Israel goes, oh my goodness, they have no walls. They don't have a strong military. This guy has had so much power in their government and their policies. And then he takes the temple, he sits in it and he says, by the way, Israel, this God of Israel thing, I am God, not the Moses type message, the God of Israel. I am him. And Israel goes, oh my goodness. So I believe that Ezekiel 38 thing is yet future. It ends with Jesus marching into Jerusalem. But I don't mind guys teaching it now. I don't mind it at all, even though I think it's a wrong application, because you know what's happened? Millions of Christians in the last 12 months are studying Ezekiel 38. I go, hey, that works for me. And just move the timing a little bit. And so I don't want to say those guys are dumb. I get it. I'm happy that millions of Christians are studying it. It's like, I'll just say one more thing on this and then we'll go to the next one. Like the Tim LaHaye, the Left Behind series, he sold 60 million copies. And I go, Lord, why? And the answer I have, God didn't tell me, but this is my answer. The Lord says, well, I let 60 million people plus their friends, so probably 200 or 300 million, sit in the comfortable situation of their armchair with their remote TV, with their chips, and they watched it. And they learned the storyline because it was interesting and it wasn't personal or threatening to them. He goes, so I use my dearly beloved Timothy LaHaye to make this popular because now the earth knows the storyline. Because if they thought they were in trouble, no one would have said it. And I didn't tell him that I was coming before that, but the seminaries did. I just didn't interrupt him because it's been a great blessing. That's why so many of us know it. All we got to do is move the storyline down. But now we got the vision of a victorious church in power and prophetic movement, because a lot of those teachers were the cessationists. They didn't believe in the gifts of the Spirit, like the supernatural. So they had no grid for an end-time revival with power, signs, and wonders. So the Lord says, hey, I'm just letting it layer by layer. I'm unfolding it decade by decade. So my statement is, Lord, thank you for Tim LaHaye. Thank you. This is really good. And I'm grateful for the Ezekiel 38 storyline right now, because many are getting familiar with it, though the timing is off, in my opinion. But I think some of the nations are going to be some of those very nations for sure.
There's this idea of the judgment of the believer, right, unto rewards. And so the psalmist speaks about, a doorkeeper in heaven. And so obviously not everybody rules and reigns. There's going to be some sense of rank. Yes.
Oh, for sure.
Can you address that a little bit? Because clearly, I mean, the refining fire that God is bringing now to me personally, I think he says, I love you too much to let you get there and find out then that you blew it.
Yes.
I'm teaching you now, and it hurts and it sucks, but I'm teaching you now, so when you get there, you're actually going to do greater things than you had ever imagined.
I don't think I can say it better than that. But 1 Corinthians 15:41, it's a verse I use all the time. Paul says, as one star differs from another star in glory, so also is the resurrection of the dead. We all differ in the measure of glory in about 10 ways. And it's very different. We're equally loved. We're equally family members. We're equally, I believe, full of joy. But a person with a great spiritual stature has a greater capacity of joy than the saved as though by fire capacity. But they're both full of joy. But one's got a gallon and one's got 100 gallons. And so I think the joy's full. I don't think the saved by fire believers are up there going, oh, man, this is horrible. I think they're going, man, it's as good as it gets. And they're going, well, I'm glad you think so. So I think that, the prayer I've prayed over the years is, Lord, shock me now, don't shock me then. But it really does matter, but you've said it well.
Can you separate what happens in the 30 days as different from the extra 45 days?
Randy. Me and Randy became friends 40 years ago. He's been asking these kind of questions for 40 years. He's still doing it. He's still got a smile on his face. I love it. You're still here and you live to tell. The 30 days, the best book on this is Joel Richardson. How many of you ever heard of Joel Richardson? Because I know he was here Thursday night. Anyway, it's called Mount Sinai to Zion. It is fantastic, where he talks about the 30 days from when the Lord appears and touches down on earth. Then it's 30 days before he conquers Jerusalem. And that 30-day period, and it's easy to find that in the Bible, but he lays it out so well. I mean, Joel, massively clear. That book, Mount Sinai to Mount Zion. So that 30 days, Jesus is actually, I agree with Joel. He touches base somewhere in the Middle East, and if I have to say it, and I said it years ago, but I quit saying it for a reason. I believe he touches base on Mount Sinai. And Joel says that in his book, but he proves it. And the reason, and I got 10 verses, but I said it some years ago, but I quit saying it because nobody wanted to hear the biblical story because they all wanted to argue, does he land in Sinai? I go, that's not even the point. The point, he touches down somewhere. And so much of the argument was shifted about where he touched down, and that's not the point. The point is about these major events happen for 30 days. So I quit saying Mount Sinai for that reason. I thought, no, I'm not going to lose the glory of this discussion over the debate on that one point right now. But he proved it so well in the book. I go, yes, thank you, Joel. And so that's the 30 days, many, many things. Then he enters up in Jerusalem, and then there's 45 more days after that. I believe that's the 45 day where he's establishing many things governmentally in the millennial kingdom. Because he doesn't wave his hand and all the kings of the earth are killed, and then waves his hands and all the new kings are appointed. I mean, it takes time. I think the 45 days, that's where the goat and sheep nations and all those kinds of the new kings are put in place. I believe there's the war criminals, the billion who took the mark of the beast, I believe are gathered. I don't know that it's all done in 45 days, but I think that 45 days, when it's over, we'll say that was the most significant 45 days since Jesus got to Jerusalem. That's why it's delineated by the angel in Daniel chapter 12. Randy. He's my buddy. You know what I love about this guy? He's been here for 40 years, goes to all the teachings, and comes to this intensives. After you've heard so much, you're still doing it. You just can't get enough, eh? That's right, I love it. Yes?
Hey, Mike. Thanks so much for doing this
Good
with
to
us.
see
We're
you.
so blessed. My heart is just trembling. I'm shaking right now. The message David had last night,
Fantastic.
and then some of the things you've been saying this morning. This 21-day fast is obviously going to increase the discussion about Israel, but we got to really kind of be prepared, because this is also going to speed up the rise of the Antichrist, isn't it?
Yes. Everything is escalating. Everything is escalating. Yeah, I've always, you guys, some people will be mad at me for this, but I've always kind of hoped I would tell the end time storyline, equip people, then I'd go to heaven and over the balcony of heaven watch all you guys walk it out. I'd go. But things are speeding up so fast. I'm going, oh, Lord, I just want to tell the story. I don't want to be in the middle of it. I want to watch and cheerlead from heaven. I'm starting to get nervous. I'm going, it's really picking up. Because I got a feeling there's not going to be good air condition in the tribulation and things like that. You know, I'm going, oh, my goodness.
Do we have time for
right?
one more online question?
You're the boss.
Okay. Many leaders are saying Asbury is the beginning of the last and greatest revival before Jesus returns. Revivals, so far are very much about holiness, repentance, release of miracles, etc. If the best wine is kept until last, and as we see the change of expression of Christianity in one generation, what do you think this last revival will be like? All revivals have elements that offend some believers. What could be the offensive or confusing part of this revival?
There's lots of questions. I probably won't answer this good because there's about 5 different points in that. But I'll say Asbury first. I love what happened in Asbury. But Asbury is not the beginning of the end revival. Meaning, Asbury is significant and it's catalytic. But you take a step back, there are things happening in Asia and Africa and Latin America. There's things happening on islands that we don't know about. And so it's easy for us, mostly as Americans, to think of stirrings in America are the eschatological starting points of things. I think that stirring was real and it matters. Boy, there's a number of stirrings. And they're down payments and they're good ones. They're good ones, but they're not even close. Not even close. Scale of 1 to 10, if most of us live at a 2, Asbury and a bunch of these movements are a 3. There's a couple 4s in the earth, but we're going to be at 10. It's way beyond the Jesus movement. I got saved in the Jesus movement in 71. And I remember the Jesus movement. I remember in 71, not just me, many of us. I witnessed somebody every day. Nearly everybody did. I led people to the Lord 1 or 2 or 3 times, 4 times every week. I'd go to a grocery store. I'd say friend on the football team. People get saved. I thought it was normal. Then about 5 years later, something like I was like 0 for 100. You know, well, something changed. I didn't even know it was a quote revival of the Jesus People movement because when you're in it, you don't know it. And so, and a lot of folks says that was the beginning. I go, that was critical, but no, the fullness is way beyond the Jesus movement. Way beyond the Jesus movement. Now, how many of you saw the Jesus Revolution? I really encourage you. I loved it. I just wept 10 times through it. Maybe not in 10, but 5 or 8. And it touched me. And I was really touched because at the very end, they're in the stadium with Billy Graham. Do you remember that? It ends in the stadium. I was a 16-year-old kid. I got to be in that stadium. I was there. I remember I went, oh my God. I remember somebody took a picture of it. I did because back then they didn't film that stuff, you know. But as a true, I'm thankful for that. that Jesus movement, but nothing close to a 10. That would have been a 3 or 4, you know. And so I appreciate every 3 and 4. I really do. It really beats 2 and 1. But we're not giving up 10 either. Stuart, you're on, I think.
All right, really quick. First of all, so enjoyed getting to spend this weekend with you all. Thanks, Mike. And really appreciate hearing your different conversations and just getting to be part of this event together. If you haven't already, don't forget to give myself or Emily your paper. And if you have any questions, you can also see me in the back of the room. I think that's it.
Anything else?
Hey, urge them to stir up the Gideon 300 thing.
Yes. So we're calling for 300 young adults to give themselves to a Daniel fast here in Kansas City. Yes, Becca.
But I don't think we know it, do we?
It's young adults, and so it depends on how you define that. How's that? Hint, hint. Yes.
You look young to me.
I would, yeah. Yeah, the age limit is 64.
Yeah, I got it. No, when we talk to I love to do this with Dave Slikers and this guy here. When we're talking to our interns or stuff, I go, because I'm like 18, 20 years older than these guys, I go, like people in me and Dave and Stuart's generation, here's what we thought. And the 20-year-olds go, yeah. These guys go, how dare you?
2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 9. And the Lord will send a strong delusion. Okay, yeah, so we're calling 300 young adults to come to the night watch for 21 days to get themselves to a Daniel fast. We will offer them free housing, free housing meaning missionary level, over at our CEC camp building and over at IHOPU. We're going to split them 150 girls, 150 guys, and we'll have different fathers and mothers. Kirk Bennett's going to give leadership to that. And there'll be mentoring, there'll be times of prayer, there'll be times of learning about the book of Daniel, and we're also going to offer them food. And so what we're asking, Daniel level food, and so what we're asking for is just go to our website. In fact, what we can do is we will email you guys, if you're interested, the link to the landing page, and so you can then forward that to as many.
How about whether they're interested or not? Do it. They can delete it if they don't like it.
They can do that. Yeah, they can do that. So yeah, we can do that. But anyway, but if you're interested, you can forward it. How's that? And so we'll get that to you guys, because we got about 80 to 100 that have signed up. We're looking for 300, and it's going to be full stop at 300, and so it's going to be not 301. And so, but it's free. It won't cost them anything except for they got to get themselves here, and we'll get them the housing, and we'll get them the food, and go for it. And they're going to do midnight to 6 for 21 days.
I think the older ones, they're like, say someone's in their 40s, they don't want to sleep with 150 20-year-olds. But we're asking our spiritual family to have host homes, and we're working on that.
We're trying to.
Yeah.
Yes. So there you have it. Let me pray for you guys. Father, thank you so much, Lord, for this group. Lord, we ask that you would put your hand on them, Father, in an increased way. Lord, I just pray, Lord, even as they fellowship, even as they share with one another via email and Zoom calls and Facebook conversations, Lord, we just pray, Lord, that you'd release oracles and revelation and understanding in them and through them. In Jesus' name, amen. Bless you guys. See you next month.